But with this particular virus, this coronavirus family, COVID-19, it's an unknown. I mean, people are studying it very aggressively right now, but we don't fully understand its mechanism and its potential. Like in other periods of our history, Americans have ramped up. I just saw in the theater department this morning, the students who were studying costume design, they are now building masks, making masks voluntarily and providing them to the hospitals in Tucson. And so it draws upon our better angels. People volunteer, they step up, they do the right thing, and we'll get through this.
All right, he's studying notes.
Well, I was looking at numbers.
Numbers are good.
Yeah.
And this one we can, if you need to refer to those, it would be great. We have Charles Geoffrion here. Now, this is an interesting podcast we're having today, which I'm really kind of excited about because it's a twofer as far as I'm concerned. The first part, we're going to talk about one hat that you wear, which is very relevant today, which has to do with public health. And you're an expert in this. Charles is an expert in this. In fact, you're the vice president of the Pima County Health Department. Is that right?
The Board of Health.
The Board of Health.
Yeah.
So, especially for the people in Tucson, I think we'll kind of get a good update of Tucson stuff. And then for the people who really want to talk about art, then we're going to go to the next section, which Charles is married to Moira Geoffrion, who is on the podcast, and he's very interested in art, and there's a lot of things that you've done with art, and we're going to talk about that. But first, let's get an update. So what's cooking in COVID-19 right now?
Well, we can talk locally. Pima County has about 150 cases right now, and the interesting part of it is, unlike the data that came out of China, Wuhan, in the early days, only about 22% of the people in Pima County are in that category. That is above age 65 and older. So
why is that, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the theory early days was that the immune system of older people would rev up much more aggressively, and then the cytokines and other immune responses would overwhelm your body and kind of crash vital organs. At this point, we don't know.
I'll give you one possibility, is that we learned from China, we distanced quicker, we shut down quicker, and so the old people are taking it seriously, and so they're not getting infected at such a rate.
Someone said that to me this morning, and I said, well, how about when I drove by Costco the other day, that early admission of people above 60 years of age, and the line went around the building and down the street. And those were all the old people.
Was that from before 60 years and earlier, older? That was
60 and above, yeah.
But again, if they are taking care of themselves, they should be immune. I'll tell you another anecdotal is I just looking at my Google analytics for my video watches. The 65 and plus has just skyrocketed who are watching videos, which tells me for sure people are at home watching that they weren't before.
Yeah. Oh, that's happening everywhere.
Yeah. So I don't know if that, it just makes sense to me that could be. Now what today is March 28th or something?
30th.
Yeah. See, days kind of stop when the world stops. So today's the last day of March. So some things will change. But if I look at the CDC predictions for Arizona, I mean, we're about to explode, right?
Correct. And as I was about to say, those numbers are going to definitely be larger than they are today. The good news is that in Pima County, the mortality rate is under 1%. The statewide, it's slightly over 1%. There's about 1,000 cases in the state of Arizona. Nationally, it's 1.2, something like that.
Mortality rate?
Mortality rate. Globally, it's just under 5%. Now, when you look at the N, the number of cases, 4 to 5% is a lot of people. And I have a colleague in Verona, Italy, with whom I've been talking and texting over the last several weeks. It's really disaster over in Italy, and Spain is
it's
really
10%
bad.
there, I think, isn't it?
It's in the range of 8 to 10%. Yeah. And what my colleague says is they witness from their window, because he's in our age group and doesn't go out, convoys of military vehicles carrying corpses or coffins of dead people that the hospitals get, and they even have refrigerated trucks now, as they did during the heat wave in Paris 10 years ago. They couldn't accommodate in the morgues the number of dead, and so they had to come up with military solutions. This is a global crisis. I mean, pandemics are just that by definition, and so we need to be smarter. And I think you're right. People are staying home, and the fact that you and I are sitting here is an exception. But
right. But the gallery's closed.
The gallery's closed.
We've kept our distance. We've disinfected our things. We could probably be a little further away.
Exactly.
But, we both have been isolated.
That's right. That's right. That's a smart thing to do.
Well, I think it is. I mean, you don't have to be ridiculous about it, but you do need to be smart. I mean, you go and fill up gas, you put some gloves on, or use something so you don't touch the handle, If you have food, you don't need to hoard it. You probably have enough to get through the next 3 weeks, and stay out of the grocery stores.
I mean, I don't understand why people are hoarding bottled water. It's not like the water system is going to fail.
Right.
Toilet paper, well, people panic.
Yeah. Well, it's it's the fear process, I guess. Do you guys talk about that in your meetings?
We have. We're much more inclined to make sure that the hospitals and providers in general have all the information that they need and the support that they need. When Ebola was an issue, when Zika was an issue, the Department of Health was prepared, had funds and rehearsed procedures in various critical hospitals in case, particularly with the GEM show that comes here and brings hundreds of thousands of people to Tucson.
Right. I'm surprised we didn't get a little seeded from that, but I guess it was just a little bit too early.
Yeah. But with this particular virus, this coronavirus family, COVID-19, it's an unknown. I mean, people are studying it very aggressively right now, but we don't fully understand its mechanism and its potential.
And we don't even understand if it's going to be affected by the heat or not. Normal these kind of coronaviruses are, but we don't really have a feel of that yet, do we?
Well, we don't, A, because we don't have experience, and B, because this particular virus, because it's new, there isn't this herd immunity potential in our country or in other countries. And
it's about to be, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, the hard way.
The hard way.
Yeah, because there's no vaccine available. So what happens is, these people are what they call naive. Our bodies are naive because we haven't been experiencing this particular virus.
Right.
In nature, viruses are constantly evolving. And when you see the massive populations, and sadly even living in slums, and many people have seen pictures from, you name it, Nairobi or Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, parts of Indonesia, where there are just hundreds of thousands of people living in very close proximity with very poor water and plumbing, and disease can spread very quickly, and pathogens evolve in that kind of environment. It's like a giant petri dish.
Yes.
And that's what's happened in this case. Now, there's all sorts of stupid theories out there about military, this and that, and bioweapons.
Right.
Nature does its thing.
Right.
And the human species, what concerns me is one of the third rails of politics that you cannot touch is population. Nobody wants to talk about population. And, when I was in high school, I remember becoming aware of the fact that there were 2 billion people on this earth. That was in the early 60s.
Yeah. Welcome to 7 now.
We're now 7.5 now, quickly moving to 8.5, 9.
Right.
And I question, without some great technological advances, and that may come. Urban farming, for example, vertical farming, all of those things may really help solve some of our issues. But as long as we're in a carbon-based economy, fully the way we are, gasoline, coal, natural gas, we are unable, I think, to sustain 8, 9, 10 billion people on this earth. I mean, the Earth systems
right.
are struggling already.
We were made as hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
sure.
and that's what we were. And then we developed agriculture, and that's when the population exploded. So I guess if agriculture goes away in some form.
Sure. And that's when art came along, too.
Yeah, about that same time.
That's right.
Yeah, they had time to actually do things
Yeah, they didn't have to
creatively.
hunt all day. They could whittle or whatever. So,
but just to talk about the herd immunity, because a lot of people won't know what that means. But basically, well, I'll let you explain it. But I mean, I understand it as a physician.
Well, I think, the experts tell me that we need well over 50% immunization in a social group.
Population.
Yeah, in a population to really allow for a virus that comes through like a wildfire, just like the fires we've seen recently in California and Colorado and Australia. The wind blows and it just sweeps across the landscape. And that's what this virus is doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have enough people that are immune because they had it, survived it, and now they have the immunization going on in their system, it'll come again, but it won't spread. It'll stop.
Right.
So it's just like building a fire break.
Right. If you if you have 10 people in the room and only 2 of them don't have immunity, then they're probably protected by the other 8.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So.
And just to say, I mean, we're looking at only about 80% of the population, at least in America, has a mild or fairly minor disease. It's 20% that are really getting ill with this. Isn't that correct? I think that's the numbers.
I think that's approximate. There's so many people that have confounding issues I mean, there's obesity, there's diabetes, there's heart disease,
age,
and age. Sure, exactly. And so what one has to do is be extra careful if you have some of those issues in your life. But even very healthy people are struggling with this. So it's a very aggressive pathogen.
Yeah, it's not something to not take seriously.
Exactly. And unfortunately, and like the president of Brazil right now is kind of, thinking the economy is more important.
So he's going to basically do the herd immunity, right? I mean, that's what's
the hard way. Yes,
that's what's going to happen,
right?
right?
Yeah. I mean, if you let things run, that wildfire spread, and wait for the herd immunity to function, you're going to lose a couple million people.
Yeah.
So we obviously don't want to see that happen.
My understanding, at first Boris Johnson was looking at potentially doing that as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But they have.
And we don't need to talk about American politics, probably.
Yeah. Well, so what's in store for Arizona in April? Do you know? Do you have a sense?
Well, I think if, the governor has been careful to encourage people to self-isolate and all, I think we're one of the states that hasn't mandated that.
I love doing podcasts because you never know what's going to happen after you do one. And 2 hours after I filmed the podcast, our governor, Doug Ducey, issued a stay-at-home order.
But nevertheless, a lot of people are doing it.
Right.
I've just started inviting people to Zinner, using Zoom to have people enjoy a dinner in their homes,
That's
cooked
wonderful.
by them, eaten by them alone, but sharing the evening with a bunch of friends. And several people, including Kathleen Sublette, have agreed to participate.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think we're going to be doing a lot more of that. And it's also going to change our economy in a lot of ways.
It is, in bad ways and perhaps in good ways, because I'm excited about new technologies that are evolving right now. We had a Safeway truck drive up to our house yesterday and deliver food. And it didn't cost us anything more. Now, a couple of things we ordered weren't provided because they were basically backlisted, but Safeway has now employing more people to drive these trucks, and if it doesn't cost a whole lot more, and you tip the guy like a pizza delivery guy.
Sure. Well, Amazon's hiring 100,000 people.
There you go. Yeah. So there are some issues that are coming out of this that I think will benefit, and the fact that the big corporations are turning around now, even voluntarily, but now under mandate, to create the ventilators, construct and manufacture. I mean, we're on a kind of a World War II footing in a way that
I think we are.
That needs to be seen as an international crisis.
And does the ventilator situation in Pima County, for assuming its peak in mid-April, do we have enough ventilators?
I wouldn't be rosy about that. I think, like any community of our size, we're struggling with inventory. Each hospital has, I think, what they need now. The worry is what happens when a guy has a heart attack, which is happening all the time in any city.
Right.
And that inventory of ventilators and respirators and so forth are needed for the normal population that are hospitalized. And now suddenly you add to that a significant load for just the virus. It's going to be a challenge. I think, like in other periods of our history, Americans have ramped up. I just saw in the theater department this morning at the university that the students who were studying costume design, and they have all the sewing machines and the fabrics, and they make the costumes for the plays and whatnot. They are now building masks, making masks voluntarily and providing them to the hospitals in Tucson. And so it draws upon our better angels. People volunteer, they step up, they do the right thing, and we'll get through this.
How about the ventilators? What do they do, though, to get more of those? Because I know that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, that
in 2
is
weeks.
I'm curious whether Raytheon would even be in a position to do something about that, but General Motors certainly, and there's several other large corporations that have the manufacturing machinery in place where they could, with some careful modifications, can start making the parts. One of the big mistakes we've made, half the clothing I'm wearing right now was made in China, because you can't buy a lot of things that aren't made in China.
It's true.
And it's been that way for
or
20
Bangladesh
years.
now, too.
Yeah,
and
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Sure, Vietnam, yeah. And good for those people. They're having a middle-class lifestyle. They all want to have air conditioning and cars and traffic jams,
Right.
like we in the West do. But the fact is, we as Americans have made ourselves vulnerable because something like 85% of the medicines that we distribute throughout America come from China. We don't even have the basic ingredients right now. So we need to retool and become more independent. And I don't mean by that isolationist, but just,
support businesses so they can.
Exactly.
Just like we have a post office.
That's right. And if I want to buy a suit coat or a shirt and I pay a little more because it was made in America, that's the price one pays to have.
Well, maybe that'll be one of the good things that comes from this.
I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. I agree. I see that. One of the other areas I'd like to talk about, you may not have a lot of information on it, but how about for our native tribes? I know, in the Navajo Nation, they've gotten, I think, 50 cases now, and they don't have health care, they don't have water, they don't have, how do you wash your hands if you have to go and get your water every day? Is anyone looking or helping those individuals?
We've just had a death now on the Tohono O'odham reservation here in near Tucson for the first time. Well, the tribes have their own health departments.
Right.
I know that the Pima County Department of Health works very closely with the Yaqui and the Tohono O'odham and other tribes. And I'm sure that's the case in northern Arizona with the Navajo and the tribal councils, the Yavapai and the Phoenix area. I think cultural respect is so important. We could go back in history and understand what happened to Native populations in this region.
Especially in 1918.
That's right.
I mean, that was a big wipeout for Native Americans.
Exactly. And even before that with
smallpox.
Smallpox, yeah. So I understand when the tribal council says, we want to do it our way, but we want to do it science-based. We want to work in partnership, and that's what's happening right now. But sure, I mean, I drive across the Navajo reservation very often, and you see every hour or two some pickup truck with a 300-gallon water, a tank of water on the back, because Dad had to go off to some source and fill that tank and bring it back to his homestead so that he'd have water.
How do you
for the
wash your
family.
hands? You can't wash your hands. You can wash them, but just rarely. I mean, you're trying to survive.
Well, it depends. Cooking, showering,
all that
whatever.
stuff,
all of that is
isolation,
a
of course.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'll just give a shout out to Adopt a Native Elder. That's a program that we're giving part of our e-blast when we make sales on that to that organization, and people who might want to help in that, because they do help with food security for the Navajos, is Adopt Elder, and you can go to their website, and I recommend going to it and giving, because to me it seems like not only the Navajos but all our native tribes at this point are a little bit at the last rung of
the pecking order, if you will.
Especially with the high rate of diabetes with the Tohoto O'odham and things. That's a real they're real health issues. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If their rates, I'm sure they will be, their mortality rates are going to be higher than the average Arizonan. I hope not. But.
And the numbers, there are some states that you think the numbers are very low, but you begin to question that. Why would they be low?
Right.
They're just not reporting it out. And there's some countries. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in different regions of Africa, and you just don't see those numbers coming up, but they're there.
Yeah, of course they are.
So, and speaking of water, when Moira and I got married, we went in the Peace Corps and lived in a mud hut in West Africa for 2 years.
Right.
And we know about water.
Yeah.
Had to go to the river and bring it back, filter it, boil it for 20 minutes rolling, put some iodine in it, whatever.
Yeah. And I'm going to get to that actually too. So when we get past the bad aspects of this, I don't know. It's just, I think it's important to have an informative podcast when you can. And I have,
good.
You're an amazing resource. You're also, we're the scientific officer and on the board for BioAllied too.
Yeah, Allied Bioscience.
Allied Bioscience.
Yeah, it's a company I helped start back about 10, 11 years ago now. And spent a lot of time with chemists and microbiologists and respiratory scientists, and we finally put together a formulation that, in the early days, friends and family helped to keep us together, have enough funding, and now we've got over 30 employees, and we moved to Dallas because we had a lot of support from some people in Dallas, and we have. About 40 patents now from the U.S. Patent Office and globally. And we've just had major publications in science peer-reviewed journals, the Journal of Clinical Infectious Disease, showing how our surface coatings have reduced pathogens, secondary infections in hospitals by a significant margin. And, it's a sad reality of today, but our product is coming to market at a very good time because we can help solve this problem. So.
It coats basically surfaces, right? So
correct.
Pathogens, not only bacterium but virus too,
yes.
won't be able to adhere or stay to the surface.
Yeah, they can't. No, well, they basically disassemble their molecules, are rendered harmless, and this is using materials that are known, so they're not a danger to the people who touch them. It doesn't rub off. The efficacy is about 90 days. And even then, it drops from 99.99 to maybe 97 or something. But we typically would go in on a quarterly basis and reapply this. So it's kind of like a fog. We have an electrostatic spray, and we spray the surfaces in the hospital rooms. We started doing buses over in California and had very good success there as well. But the bus companies basically said, people get on the bus, they get off the bus. Not our problem.
It's their problem now.
Well, it is now.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
So if we can get into the MTA in Boston or New York or the BART in San Francisco, I think we can make a difference as well. So all of those conversations are underway, along with other groups that are looking at us very seriously.
And do you have the ability to ramp up to get the product to places that are needed?
Yep. We've already had sufficient infusion of funds right now to buy more equipment, to produce more product, hire more people, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, we got to be careful we don't stumble as we run up this slope.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a concern when because you have to ramp up now. I mean, I'm sure the demand for for this is fairly insane, I would think.
It is. I mean, people are looking for solutions and
Yeah.
long-term solutions, and so I think this is a very science-based product where we have 5 PhDs working in our lab in biophysics and in microbiology and biochemistry and chemistry. So we've got a good team all around this, and then we take the results and we farm them out to some independent labs, GLP-rated labs we have Biohazard 2, BL2 in our lab, but we go to a BL3 to work on some of these more nasty viral issues, and we're waiting for results from an independent lab right now to confirm what we think we know. So, yeah.
And when you had this in mind, this was a 10-year project, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's been about 10 years. A guy came to me through a third-party friend of a friend and said, I got this idea. I don't know quite where to go with it or how to prove it. And so I had just retired as Associate Vice President for Research at the university, and I knew a lot of smart people, a lot smarter than me, and said, what could we do? And talked to one or two of them, and we wound up with some people. You always start with a literature search and find out what else is out there, what other people are doing. Are there other patents around this or that?
Was this for pneumococcal infection reduction? In other words, hospital-based kind of thing?
Well, we thought surfaces in general. In fact, again, we thought transportation was a big issue, airplanes, cruise ships, and so on.
Yeah.
We're still talking to those people.
I'm sure.
Yeah. But then we also did an early test after the buses in L.A. and Santa Monica. We did a hospital in the L.A. area and had similar results. And so then we basically went back to basics and really looked very carefully at the science behind what we're doing. Because people were asking, well, what's the mechanism? How does it work?
I'm sure they were.
We were saying, we got to come up with a good answer to that and understand what's going on. So I think we're feeling very confident now. And the EPA has now looked at us at several levels. And, we're different. It's a new product. It's different than what's out there on the shelves. And so EPA, FDA, CDC, they're all saying, well, you're not a pesticide, but you're not an antimicrobial. So how does this work? And so we're excited. There's a secret sauce, obviously. That's where our patents protect our intellectual property. But as a business, I think we're going to move forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're going to get a boost from this. But
yeah.
So tell me, what do you, just kind of summarizing, where do you see this going? I know it's very difficult to try to understand what can happen, but I mean, we have the potential for today, Johnson & Johnson saying they might have a vaccine that they can start in September, which would be unbelievable, things like that. And we all know it's going to cycle again. So what do you see? What's the outlook?
Well, vaccines usually take 12 to 18 months at least to really know for sure that they're going to work.
Right.
And then the question is, will this thing be like the influenza that we, every fall or every November-ish, so we tend to get immunization. At the same time, there's been an anti-vax movement in throughout the world, and even now with things like polio in northern Nigeria, there are people who are saying we don't want to get immunized because it's a plot.
And Pakistan too.
And Pakistan, that's right, yeah. And so we have to fight this both pseudoscience nonsense that you find on radio talk shows often, and this unwillingness to open to others who want to help you. I think that's part of the slow response from the United States on this particular issue, when others were offering test kits and so forth, and we said, no, we have our own. But we didn't, and we barely do now. It's a mystery as to how this is going to proceed. I'm not too optimistic that we aren't going to have some significant impacts, both economically certainly and health-wise. But we'll get through it, and then we'll be smarter, hopefully, coming out. The fact that previous administrations had a
pandemic director.
An endemic director and a SWAT team basically staying current with all of the global dynamics that were going on and informed, ready to act, put through policies. All of that was disbanded. Now we're seeing the price we're paying as a result of that. I think we would have been much more prepared to jump on this early. And that's the only way you can do this. If you don't start it early, it's that exponential curve. If you have one person infecting 3 others, and then it goes to 9 and then 27, and then, it just very quickly just way gets out of control, and you can't stop it at that point. So
that's kind of where we are now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it seems like people who are out there listening take it seriously. Don't think this is not something that's of real seriousness.
Yeah. I think there are, the teenagers that were partying during spring break in Fort Lauderdale or the Miami Beach. It reminds me of, I've been through 3 hurricanes in my life, and every once in a while you read about people having a hurricane party in a beach cabin somewhere, and they all get wiped out by the tidal surge or something. And, well, they were drunk, I suppose, so they didn't know the difference or whatever. But, I mean, that's the kind of attitude we have to avoid because this thing will really hit us in the neck real hard if we don't take the necessary steps. So self-isolation right now, aren't we lucky that we have all sorts of TV options, movies
podcasts.
And news and podcasts, and the internet. You can Google stuff and get immediate data, which you have to be smart to know that it's a reliable source. But nevertheless.
Any recommendations and sources for information?
Well, I tend to go with the CDC, and the state of Arizona now has a very good website, and Pima County sort of mirrors that. So you can get local information as well as look at global trends. It's. I said to some students a year or so ago, the way America is going right now, sadly, I think we need a national crisis to pull us all together. This tribalism, this far left, far right stuff, I've always been somebody that wants to meet in the middle and shake hands and move forward.
Right.
And
can't shake hands anymore.
That's right. Can't even fist bump.
No.
That's right. Yeah, 6 foot separation.
Yeah.
But
bow.
But it was that. I mean, we need to get away from this bubble that all of us tend to exist in, and we're all guilty of it to some degree. But
act as like one as Americans.
That's right.
Yeah, that would be helpful for sure, no doubt about
it.
So tell me, in just this last little bit, what are you doing for yourself?
Oh, I like to read a lot. I'm doing some writing, and I enjoy that. Trying to, we're building a house up in Colorado to be a kind of a getaway place on a few acres of land, and have a lovely orchard up there. And
you brought me some honey, by the way.
I did.
For those who are watching YouTube,
there's
actual honey. It's not available for sale, but you got to know Charles, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, well, when you get 20, 30 gallons of honey, and honey's heavy, by the way, in a bucket.
It is.
But you process that honey, and wait till you taste it. You'll like it.
I'm going to.
But I'm not a survivalist or a prepper, but I just would like to be able to have a quiet place that's a little bit away from the maddening crowd, as they say, and do some reading and writing up there. And then when the apples are ready, and the peaches and the pears and the plums, you work hard. You get over 100 fruit trees. It's a lot of work. So,
all right. So I say now we transition to finding out about you, since we know you like fruit and vegetables and semi-isolation. Yeah. So that's the part we've gotten, the serious part. Now let's find out a little bit about the art part, because you do have a long history of art. You're married to an artist. You've done some really interesting things in your life. I just kind of like to find out, clearly you grew up in New England somewhere.
Oh, of course.
Tell me about that.
People recognize that right away.
I don't even have to ask. I can hear that you were somewhere in that vicinity.
Sure. No, in the Boston suburbs, Arlington is, and I often would park my car in the Harvard yard.
In the car in the yard.
Right. So, I enjoyed that, and that's where I met Moira at Boston University.
What did your folks do there?
My dad was a mailman, but he also sang in the opera, and was
really?
They're French Canadians. His mother was a Abenaki Indian tribe, up in the Vermont Canadian border area, and the dad and mother met in a voice training program. I forget the name of the school now, but it was a fairly well-known group in Boston where they studied opera, basically. And so Dad, this is the Depression and the war years, and so he struggled, like so many others, finding a job, and finally got a job as a mailman. But he also was the director of the French choir in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Wow. And when I was a kid, sometimes I would listen to them. They'd be on the radio even, and so
it'd be your mom and dad both singing
together, singing.
So he really wanted to be a singer, and
yes,
I take it. Yeah. Was she a singer or was she a mom?
She was. She was. She's a stay-at-home mom and raised 3 boys. Yeah. But it was. Also a delight to hear them sing, and every Sunday we'd go to church, and I'd be up in the choir loft, and they had a really good organ at this particular church, and I used to love sitting right behind the organist, who would just rip away. When the mass was over, he would just let it go with all the stops out. And
he loved opera. That was his thing.
Yeah, and so it was exciting to enjoy music from that perspective.
Did he discuss about when he was older, about not maybe being able to do his dream with you?
No, I don't think I think he enjoyed what he could do.
He was okay with what he had.
He was okay, yeah. He was a very religious guy. Both my parents were, and they cared a lot about people and family, and we had a good life growing up. Kind of a suburban setting, and high school was a good time for me. I was class president of the senior class, and then went to college.
You played football too, didn't you?
I did, yeah, I did. Although not great. Or
how about art? Were you into art at all at that point?
Music was my thing. I played the clarinet and the piano, and it's funny. My 2 brothers and I were in the school orchestra, and my oldest brother was the lead percussionist. My second brother was the first chair in the trumpet section, and I was the first clarinet. And there was another family of 3 women who were first violin, first viola, first cellist. And we used to joke saying if the 6th of us walked out, the whole place would fall apart, So, but then also played in a marching band, which was very exciting. We would St. Patty's Day would be occurred, and we would be marching through South Boston, and 110 musicians in military style,
right.
With the drums.
Yeah, I did it in high school.
It was a lot of fun, and your heart rate would go up when you'd hear that drum roll, and everybody'd step off and march through town, and people on the streets loving it. It was exciting times. It was fun to be active with all of that. And then in college I had a...
And when did you go to college? What year was that?
61, 65. I met Moira in 62, and we kind of quickly fell in love. And she was an art major, and I was in government and international affairs, diplomacy, that area.
Is that what you thought you would be doing, is diplomacy?
Yeah, exactly. And
which college was this?
Yeah, Boston University.
Boston University.
Yeah. And I had a motorcycle, and sometimes I'd pick up Moira from where she was living. It would be about a couple miles to the campus, and urban campus, and going over the Charles River, over the bridge, and Moira would be on the back of my motorcycle with a 4x4-foot stretched canvas, you know. It was like a sail, you know, in the wind. And sometimes it would be, you know, 18 degrees or something, and we were, you know. But it was a lot easier to get to school that way than to take the bus with a big canvas. We were crazy and college age, so
yeah.
It was
also toward the end of it is beginning of the Vietnam War.
It was, yeah. And I had a college deferment, and then it's interesting. We were both accepted as individuals before we were married to join the Peace Corps, and
what was it about the Peace Corps? I mean, at that time that
It was magical.
Was it really Kennedy?
It was Kennedy. You know, Moira and I were walking through Kenmore Square one day, holding hands. We were, you know, college juniors, and all of a sudden there was a little blast of a siren from a motorcycle, you know, police escort, and we kind of turned around. It was, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and here's this open Cadillac, and Jack Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy are right there, and you know, we're just 10 feet away, and people are waving, and it was that Camelot theme that was going on in the Boston area particularly.
I would think.
And the idea of going overseas, sharing American values, working to help others, and one of the big elements of the Peace Corps was always to then bring that experience home and you know, educate America more about what you experienced in an African village. But I tell you, we did a lot of hard work in those 2 years, you know, in the village.
And did you both end up in the same?
Well, we did. Obviously, at this point, we were married.
You got married,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And, you know, we went to train for 11 weeks at Hampton Institute, which is now called Hampton University, which is one of the traditionally Black American schools. But in 1965, you know, the Civil Rights Act had just been passed, and so here were mostly white kids living on a black campus. We were very welcome there, except the town. When we'd step off campus, you know, the town was not that friendly to us.
Yeah.
But we had, to this day, I mean, we went back there for a 50th anniversary, and I was just amazed at how
the growth
and the quality of that campus. And how welcomed we were by still a largely Black American population. Things have changed, you know, to the good in many, many ways, at least for that middle class and above in minority populations in this country. Those opportunities are there. Certainly there's an underbelly of problems that have to do with poverty, which have to be addressed and still aren't addressed properly. But from there we went to the Caribbean and stayed for another month or so in St. Croix, where the Peace Corps had a large training center. And we then had tropical experiences going on, which was a good preparation for West Africa. And then we were home for Christmas. And then off we went to Dakar and in Senegal, and then eventually wound up in Freetown and spent another month in Freetown at the university campus there. And then, and this is the fun part, so Peace Corps truck takes us and some furniture and a couple of World War II cases of sea rations.
Right.
And they dump us in a village where they had certainly negotiated with the chief of the village, and so there was a house area available for us. And when that pickup truck drove away and left us in this village with, you know, survival gear.
Can't speak the language either, right?
Well, no, okay, I didn't mention that, but we had a substantial amount of language training. You know,
so
6 hours a day for 11 weeks.
Okay, so
with native
get
speakers.
by.
So yeah. So we were certainly able to be polite in the beginning. But I'll tell you an interesting story. That first night, there was a little boy who had croup, and he probably would have died. And some people in the village came to us the first night. And, you know, Moira and I kind of looked at each other and said, now we'd had basic training in health and you know. So I boiled water And Moira sat down with this little boy. He was probably under 2 years of age. Took him on her lap. I put that boiled water next to them and put a towel over them, made a steam tent.
Yeah.
Made a difference.
Oh, yeah. How you treat them.
The next morning, there was a line of people outside our hut. We didn't have windows or doors. We just, wooden shutters with knots and holes, and these little eyeballs looking through, saying, "When are those Americans going to wake up? They're sleeping late. We're already up."
Right.
And it went on from there. I hooked up with an Italian doctor who used to travel through the area. The next thing you know, we were running a clinic. We did surgery there. I mean, things you'd never be allowed to do in
Right. It was that isolated.
Nations, but it was that isolated that I would help identify some basics, and then the doctor would come in once a month, and I'd have people lined up and ready for him to handle, and then he would provide us with the drugs we needed for a variety of issues that we could treat. And boy, that kept us busy for 2 years.
And what was your mission statement? Yeah. Just to do good
and make... It's called community development. Yeah. The first year, we were into the third cycle of people going out into the various developing countries. The first year and second year, a bunch of single men with pickup trucks and shovels and, building bridges, building clinics, building schools, and a bunch of single women living on school compounds as teachers. We come along as the first trial in which they say, no trucks, no motorcycles for you guys. You're going to live in the villages. We'll give you a bicycle. And married couples who speak the language and are going to do community development. And that's a very broadly defined program. I think the Peace Corps has kind of moved away from that. And now if you want to be in the Peace Corps, you need to have a specialty. Everything from radar specialists to work at an airport to nursing and emergency medicine and or engineering, those kinds of things, because they're much more practical. But in our day, it worked well. And we did build a bridge. We did both culturally and it's this old man who befriended me, one of the village elders. 3 or 4 years after I left there, I got a letter, one of those aerogram letters, that they had in those days. And he had found somebody who could write in English, and he wrote to me on his deathbed that he remembered me as a good stranger. And, it reminds me, in that village, I learned a saying.
This is in Senegal?
Now this is in Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone.
Yeah, which sadly, 20 years later, had the awful blood diamond wars and all of that, and then later Ebola. So obviously the roots that we tried to generate in those early days
probably
didn't take in many cases. But I learned an expression from the people in the village that I love to share with people. No matter how hot the water in your well, it won't cook your rice. And whenever I start a seminar when I'm teaching, I always say that to the students, and they all kind of look bewildered and bemused and say, what the heck is he talking about? I say, think about it, You're sitting here, and you and I are sitting here right now, and people everywhere, they have some level of interest in a topic. But if it's not hot enough to cook your rice, you got to get out there and study it and work it and learn from it and contribute to it. And that's what I find motivates me to really, things I care about, I really engage in them, make them
You light
work.
The fire.
Yeah, you got to raise the temperature.
Now, you brought in this piece that's for those people who are watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can see in the background.
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah.
So this is a wooden door lock, but it has some interest because of the art form in it.
Exactly. It's a West African work, and it has what Professor Roy Sieber at Indiana University, a noted historian of art in the indigenous cultures around the world, used to say is art for life's sake, as opposed to often art for art's sake. That is more a Western concept. So this was a door lock. You can see how it slides back and forth, and it was on a large door, maybe 7 feet tall and 3 or 4 feet wide, on the side of the entrance door of a mud granary. Now, when you're living in a subsistence agricultural economy,
that stuff's important.
It's very important because you grow your rice or your maize or other crops, your cassava and so forth, and you put it in this granary for protection. It's built up off the ground. They try to keep rats out of it and so on. And you have this door, and that door slides over and locks it, and that spirit that you see there hanging on the wall is watching, because the face, you'll notice that's the back of the head.
Yes.
The face is looking into the granary to inspect and protect the grain for the family. Because if you lose that grain, you don't eat until the following harvest.
Right, or you die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's art for art's sake, but also it has spiritual sake.
Exactly.
It has maybe powerful. It has a lot of things that make. It's not just art; it's something else.
Yeah. It's not something that you think is attractive or pretty or I mean, I love art from all different perspectives, but I really get excited about art like this because, in other words, you could have a very simple functional lock, or you could do something like this, which adds to your life. It's sort of like with my idea about public art. I've been on 2 or 3 different boards in this community, and there are times when someone will say, well, why do we need public art? And I'm saying, well, you drive down this road or under this bridge.
Why do we need public art?
That's right.
It doesn't even make sense.
And
to
you
me.
drive past this gray concrete wall
Right.
for 20 years. Or you can drive by this concrete wall that is festooned with, tiles or sculptural elements and so forth. It lightens your spirit. It makes your day better. It might even draw a smile to your face on occasion.
Or inspire you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what art does in life. Whether it's indigenous work or the contemporary stuff. It's wonderful to have that as part of your world, and so much better than gray concrete.
Well, and talking about art for art's sake, I mean, you've been married to an artist now since, 62? 60 years?
Yeah, 65. So it's been, we're getting
55
on into
years.
55 years.
So what's that like? I haven't really talked in great detail to somebody who's a spouse of an artist. Now, I have artists who are artists and they're married to each other, like John and Terry Kelly Moyers, but you're not an artist, so to speak, right?
Correct.
Yeah, you're more of a scientist, I would say.
Yeah.
But you have a deep appreciation for art. Did that start with being married to an artist?
I didn't grow up with surrounded by knowledge or experience specific to what we would consider art or the art world or galleries, and I would go to museums, but I was more interested in natural museum, frankly. But living with Moira, my eyes were opened in much wider and in different directions, and we understood how important it was to her. But she jokes sometimes about how I've understood that she has a lover. Because sometimes I'll wake up at 4:30 in the morning and she's out of bed already, and I know where she is. She's in the studio, working on art, and it just. As she says, if I can't do art, I don't. What's the point?
I don't breathe.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's such a integral part of her personality and her day-to-day activity. And when we're driving to Colorado and we're on that Indian Highway 15, cutting across, and it's a very rural area with a lot of open spaces, and occasionally there'll be some horses or sheep or something just roaming, and Moira will say, stop, I'm going to sketch and photograph and so forth.
And what do you do while she's doing that?
Well, I kind of close my eyes and take a rest.
But you understand the compulsion.
Exactly. And it's healthy for her, and it's good. And, occasionally she sells some stuff.
Yeah.
So
we've done very well with her work here.
Yeah.
And do you find that she relies on your opinion for what she's done?
That's interesting. Occasionally she'll, I know when she's feeling a little stressed or not quite clear, and I love this when she does this. She'll say, Charles, what do you think, and did I get those clouds right, or did I, and I'm very quick to be respectful about what I'm saying, but on the other hand, I'm honest. And
you give her a true opinion.
That's right, yeah. And generally speaking, I think it works, it's just...
well, they ask for a reason.
Sure.
They want that.
Yeah.
They don't ask somebody who's a collector. They want somebody who knows them at their worst.
Yeah. Right.
And I think most artists that I've talked to, their significant other, they use them as a sounding board.
Sure.
And you know her work better than probably anybody.
Yeah. And what I really enjoy is to see her work as it's evolved over 50 years. And how different it is now than it was when she was an undergraduate painter, and then a graduate student did her MFA in sculpture, and then, she started a foundry at Notre Dame, and we were there for 12, 13 years, and then she began a foundry here in Tucson at the University of Arizona. She came to be the head of the School of Art, and in both cases, foundry work is really demanding.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. But later now, she's gone back to painting because the foundry work kind of wrecked her hands and wrists, and she's had all sorts of carpal tunnel issues and so forth.
I'm sure.
And so, but the fact is, she continues. I mean, every day she's doing something with art, and in one way or the other.
Or art related.
Yeah, art related, like the Contemporary Art Society. We put this program together, go to Venice and Verona. We've been part of the Contemporary Art Society for years and had trips to Havana, to Berlin, London.
You're also a chair or have been?
I am currently the chairman of the Leadership Council for the University's Museum, which is a terrific collection here in Tucson. It's little known, and to be blunt, the university hasn't seen it as a priority in the days that I've been here since we came in '86.
That's changed dramatically,
it's
right?
Changing now, and the new president has
right?
really clearly identified the arts as a major opportunity for the campus and the community. And so, and I've talked to him about it, and he's very clear. I mean, he's now changed the administrative structure around the art, so it's not just a dean anymore, but there's a vice president who sits at the president's table, and as they allocate resources and set priorities, the museum is going to be one of the high points.
Yeah, the photography especially is.
Oh yeah, the Center for Creative Photography is world renowned, and that has been. I mean, the people behind that really knew what they were doing. But the Art Museum has some terrific collections.
Rothko, de
sure,
Kooning,
sure, yeah.
O'Keeffe,
Yep.
Benton,
Yeah.
Dixon. I mean, they have.
Sure.
It's a pretty impressive collection.
Yeah. When I accepted this position, I looked around. You can do this on the web now, but prioritize the university collections of art, and U of A is ranked 24th in the nation.
Wow.
And I was impressed with that and a little bit surprised because the building itself is sort of 1950-ish, and it hasn't really been updated. They just redid the lobby and a couple of other things right now. And, of course, the famous story of the de Kooning.
Yes, it's in my next book, by the way.
Oh, is it? Oh, cool.
I made it as a
good.
as a part of the plot line.
Yeah. Well, it was stolen, and 30 years later it was recovered, and this is a very valuable painting.
Yeah, very valuable.
Which is at the Getty right now and being restored, which is going to be exciting. And but also, we're working right now. In October of this year, there will be a major show on.
Hopefully.
Well, sure. We don't know about social separation in October of this year, but yes, we're optimistic. With a private collection all about food, but these are all blue chip artists who express some element of food in their work, and
like Oldberg would be in it. Klaus Oldberg.
Yeah.
Well, Wayne Thiebaud could be a nice one for pies and cakes. Sure. I don't know if he is. But.
Yeah. But many of the named artists that are very popular. This particular collector has has collected their works over the years.
It's a wonderful kind of subject to go, I'm going to do this.
Well, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, well,
actually.
and one of the curators there really identified in this massive collection that this guy has, saying, well, food is like a sub-theme that is jumping out at her, and they all agreed. And so we're going to do this, but we're going to build it with the Ecology of Humanities, Ecology of Agriculture, all these different faculty experts in these different disciplines are going to come and talk about food. What's going to be on the table in the year 2040 is one of the themes. So we're going to build around the art expression that you see with respect to food and talk about all sorts of cultural and societal issues. Food justice, the environment, quality, how do you feed the
7.8 billion.
That's right, and more. All these things by 2040, it's going to be a big deal. What about water in this community? All of those issues are going to be explored under the context of this museum setting and the beauty that we've had.
Well, and of course, climate change is going to dramatically change the way food's grown.
That's right.
To the benefit for some and to the detriment to others.
Sure, exactly. And one of the things that really worries me now, because you know that I'm very active in the area of climate issues, that this coronavirus issue is really taking us away from that. And if we don't, we've got to walk and chew gum here. We've got to handle both of these issues, because if we don't, we're really going to be in trouble. Because the climate, it's not ideology, it's not politics, it's simple physics and biology. The Earth processes over hundreds of millions of years, sequestered underground what we know today as coal and oil. And in just 250, 300 years, humans have taken all that stuff out of the soil and pumped it back into the atmosphere, all that carbon. And that's when I talk to, deniers say, oh, humans can't affect these huge global systems. The layer of the atmosphere around the Earth is thinner around the Earth than the skin of an apple is to that apple. That is how thin the
ozone is.
And we're it's a dumping ground for us, And the ocean's another thing. I had a Fulbright, and I was off in India, and I was on the Bengal Bay side, and I couldn't sleep, and I was out about 4:30 in the morning jogging on the beach, beautiful beach. And I went in to surf, and I was, swimming, cooling off. It was still dark. And I realized things were sort of bumping on my body, and I thought, I don't know what that is.
Plastic.
So I got out of the water as the sun was rising, and I looked, and it was human feces.
Even worse.
You know what I did? Went back to the hotel and scrubbed, real hard.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, washed my hands.
Human feces covered in plastic, probably.
That's right. Yeah. Because there was a community there that just dumped all of its sewage right into the river, which flowed out to the ocean, and the tide had pushed it in the direction where I was swimming. That's happening in spades now, all over the world, but particularly in parts of Asia where the economy is not really established. You've got people using rivers as just open sores. And
well, I'll give you a positive maybe, that the pandemic shows how interconnected we are.
Sure.
And maybe as a world society, we go, okay, we have to work together on a lot of things, not just, being identified when a pandemic's coming across, but everything.
Yeah.
Trade, climate, all these things are interconnected. We're all on the same spinning globe, and we can't ignore it.
No. And it's in our interest.
Yeah, of course, as a species.
Yeah, exactly, as a species, because people who are deeply religiously motivated may not resonate with this message, but the human race is a species, like many, many other species. The Earth will do just fine without us, but we need the Earth, and if we don't maintain the Earth, just like my bees, if I don't maintain the hive, I'm not going to get any honey. And the bees do their job, but only if I can help provide an environment where they're going to be healthy. And the honey's great.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
We
can't
want our
just
honey.
keep open sores, polluting plastics and so forth, with 7, 8, 9 billion people, many of whom live in poverty, so that they don't have any options. They don't have sewer lines. They don't have recyclable opportunities and so on.
Well, I do think there may be a lane for art in this too.
Yes.
You know?
Well, art is often the ability to critique us. You know, it kind of gets in our face often and shows us things that we haven't, or we've repressed, or we don't want to think about. And suddenly we see it in front of us on the wall or in a sculpture. Not all art is that way, but many times artists can be very aggressive in trying to bring things to our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, music is that way too. I mean, some of the protest songs and other songs. You know, one of my favorites was Buffy St. Marie, who is an artist herself, but also I helped just for a short time worked with her on the Cradleboard teaching project, which before the internet was really a big deal. It was more like pen pals, where kids in schools on Indian reservations would connect with a school in say Illinois or wherever, and they would exchange materials and ideas and write to each other. And so
what was
forth.
that called? Red Ink? Or something?
No, Red Ink was a literary magazine from the American Graduate Indian program here at the university that I was active with. But no, Buffy started something called the Cradleboard Teaching Project. And it was good. I'm not sure if it's still going now, but she really cared about communicating across cultures, and if you listen to, and I highly recommend, she was a wonderful person to listen to and understand her both her vocal expression and her themes that she developed that were, especially in the protest years around the war, Vietnam War. She was very powerful to focus people on those issues. And that's an example between her art and her music of somebody who really contributed a great deal to our nation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I just think that art has to be part of everyone's life. It's both motivating and inspiring.
Yeah, I find it really interesting during these times of isolation. For most people, this is a very it's a great hardship. They're not used to it. And I've talked to dozens of my artists, and they're all kind of saying, this is what I do. Mm-hmm. I isolate every day. This is how I create. Yeah. I'm concerned. I'm worried for my family, but you know, I'm still doing exactly what I was doing. And in fact, if I don't do it, I'll think about all the things that are going on. So in some respects, I think the artists may be the healthiest in this mentally, because they can still do their job for the most part.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Even though we need everybody out there to buy art. That's yes. True.
No, it's true.
You know,
true.
Especially during this time.
Yeah.
You know, this is a time when you go, oh, I just better not. Well, go buy something. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be much. And it can be local. It can be whatever. But you support the artists who, depend on this.
Yeah. And you buy something you want to live with.
That's right.
You know, it's not something that you put in a closet or in storage and hope it's going to get more value or something. You put it on your wall. You put it in your face. You know, you see it. You visit it every day. You know, you enjoy it.
Well, I still remember selling a piece on 9/11 it was to Michael Blake. Mm-hmm. And Michael Blake, who wrote Dances with Wolves, and it was that day. And he did it, I think, primarily because he wanted to support what was going on in the community, the art community too. He could see what the implications were going to be for the gallery and for other people at that time, and he wanted to support. And I still respect that. I still remember it, you know.
Sure, he made a statement.
He made a statement.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's an impressive.
Sure.
So I think we all have to make our little statements, whatever they are. Mm-hmm. You know, pick a charity, pick a something. If you have the ability to help, you should. But don't forget the creative types.
You know, that's right. And I learned, again, so much of my adult formation began in those African villages because it was a survival day-to-day thing, you know, both to have clean drinking water and to have a diet that was going to sustain you. But you learn that you can't be all things to all people, but you can help somebody. And that's essential. You know, you can make a difference in some people's lives without wrecking yourself, you know, in the process.
Right.
And
you have to take care of yourself, clearly.
Yes.
And your families and whatever. But, you know, it's a great time to make a statement of who you are. Yeah.
Sure.
Show your real stripe.
That's
cook
right.
the rice.
Cook the rice.
Right?
Yes. Get it hot enough to cook. Yeah.
Cook it.
Yeah. Right. You know, and the other thing, just there's another African expression. When the elephants fight, the grass is trampled. And what they're really saying there is when the big people, the rich people, the big politicians, when they struggle and fight and all that, it's the people that are stepped on.
Yeah.
And, you know.
And without the people, you can't eat, and the elephants
right.
die. They got to have the grass.
Yep.
So we are that grass.
Yes, yes.
Any parting words you want to give the listeners about art or the pandemic?
Well, you know, I tend to be a little bit down sometimes because of the struggles we're having with the climate and now with the virus and so on. But I am heartened greatly and excited and enthused when I come to an opening, say here at the gallery, when social groupings were
back in the day when we used to do that.
Well, it wasn't that long ago, and it will come soon.
It will.
And you can hardly walk in the door here because there are so many people in here, shoulder to shoulder, looking at art, enjoying what you and Kathleen have created here. That's one example. And just down the street, Sabino Canyon, which is a beautiful piece of nature. You know, hiking up 3.5 miles into the canyon or on a couple of those side trails that go up deeper into the mountains. And the parking lot is so full of cars, you can hardly find a place so you can hike. And that makes me feel good about the human race. When people are doing that and enjoying an opening at a gallery, that tells you that some good things are happening. And I look forward to that.
Yeah, we're in touch with the creative and the natural side of us.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I really believe it's important during this times of crisis, which I think this is really one of those times, is that you get to nature, whatever you can. I don't care what it is, even if it's looking out your window and watching the clouds go by and the occasional bird go by, or looking at art. You know?
Yeah.
Don't just read negative things. Don't just watch negative things because it flows you into this horrible, you know, stress, you know, thing. And as my guest on that I had, Seymour Reichlin, who talked about stress just a couple podcasts ago, you know, stress causes disease. It's true.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and you know what? Music is also a balm that helps with
that's
stress.
right.
You know, if you have some art, some nature, some music, and perhaps a good wine occasionally, you can't do any better than that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Charles Geoffrion, thank you so much for
Certainly.
coming in, you know, and just kind of giving us an update of what's going on in the world and letting us share your life, which sounds like it was a fascinating life. We only touched briefly on it, you know, but we'll have more. I told Moira she has to come back anyway because when she was here, she had I've got 50 minutes and that's it.
She had to get back to the easel, you know.
Yeah, so she got to go back to the easel.
No.
So.
But no, we'll there's a lot more to come. There's more chapters. So,
well, we may have you act sooner than you think. If things happen on this virus, we might just have you up for an update to kind of let us know what's going on. I would appreciate it. And I thank you for taking the time. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now. All right.
Take care.
Charles Geoffrion, Art Dealer Diaries.
Bye.
You know, the best thing is getting to sit and talk with somebody right now. I love it.
Sure it is. You're right.
We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.